Olivia Mason stared at her salad, poking at a cherry tomato that rolled away from her fork. The busy restaurant was filled with the sounds of people talking and eating lunch. She was waiting for a possible client for her small engineering company, but they were running late. "Olivia, is that you?" The voice made her stomach drop. She looked up to see Eric Daniels, her ex-boyfriend, standing by her table with a smirk that instantly reminded her of their bad breakup. He wore an expensive suit that showed off his success, looking down at her with complete confidence. "Eric, what a surprise," she said, keeping her voice steady despite feeling very anxious inside. "Mind if I join you for a moment, for old time's sake?" Without waiting for her answer, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Eric hadn't changed, still acting like the world revolved around him. Their relationship had ended when Olivia found out he'd been lying about his business trips, which were actually secret meetings with another woman. The breakup had been harsh, with Eric making fun of her dreams to start her own aerospace engineering business. "So, still trying to make that little business of yours work?" Eric's tone was very rude. "I thought you would have given up by now and joined a real company. North Star Dynamics has been looking for engineers, though they might want someone with more real experience." Olivia felt her cheeks turn red. "My firm is doing just fine, thank you." "Is it, though?" Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. "People in the industry are saying that you're struggling to get contracts. That's what happens when you try to compete in a field run by people who know what they're doing." Before she could respond, Eric continued, his voice growing louder, clearly enjoying the attention from nearby diners. "Remember that design problem in your prototype system? The one that would have caused a total failure if I hadn't pointed it out? That's the difference between hobbyists and professionals, Liv. The worst part was that there had been no design problem. Eric had deliberately misread her plans to make her look bad during a presentation they had both worked on when they were dating. It had taken her weeks to rebuild her reputation with that client. I'm surprised anyone trusts their aerospace projects to someone who couldn't even keep a boyfriend interested," Eric said with a cruel smile, purposely loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Olivia felt the eyes of other diners on her. Her throat tightened as she tried to think of something to say that wouldn't make the scene worse. The professional lunch she had planned was now a public humiliation. What she didn't notice was the man at the next table who had stopped eating and was listening carefully, his blue eyes narrowing as Eric continued his mean comments. "Your little firm will never compete with the big players," Eric said, waving his hand dismissively. "You should have listened to me when we were together. I told you that your ideas were too risky, too untested. No serious space company will ever take a chance on your designs." Olivia gripped her fork tightly, trying to control her anger. "My designs are solid, Eric. They've been peer-reviewed and..." "Peer-reviewed by who? Your college friends?" Eric laughed. "The real industry doesn't work that way, Liv. It's about connections and proven track records, neither of which you have." A server approached their table. "Can I get you anything, sir?" "He's not staying," Olivia said quickly, but Eric ignored her. "I'll have a sparkling water," he told the server, then turned back to Olivia. "Unless you'd like to buy me lunch, I could give you some free advice on how to save that sinking ship you call a business." The server looked uncomfortable but nodded and walked away. Olivia felt trapped. Causing a scene would only make things worse for her professionally, but sitting here taking Eric's insults was unbearable. "I heard you pitched to Orion Systems last month," Eric continued. "A friend on their board told me they almost laughed you out of the room. Something about your life support system design being theoretically interesting but practically naive." This was a direct hit. Olivia had indeed pitched to Orion Systems, and while they hadn't laughed her out, they had declined her proposal, with similar wording. How did Eric know about this? Was he tracking her business movements? "The space industry is small, Liv," Eric said, as if reading her thoughts. "Word gets around. Your reputation is, well, let's just say you're becoming known as someone with big dreams but small capabilities." "That's not true," Olivia said, her voice finally showing some emotion. "My designs are innovative. Just because they don't follow the usual innovation without practicality is just daydreaming." Eric cut her off. "Remember when we were together? How many nights I had to explain basic aerospace principles to you? Those fundamentals haven't changed. This was another lie. Olivia had graduated at the top of her class in aerospace engineering while Eric had barely passed. He had often taken credit for her work when they collaborated, something she had only realized after their breakup. Maybe you should stick to smaller projects, Eric suggested with fake kindness in his voice. Local drone services, perhaps? Something more appropriate for your skill level. Olivia felt a lump in her throat. The worst thing about Eric's attacks was how public they were. Several people at nearby tables were now openly watching their exchange. In a business that relied heavily on reputation, this kind of public humiliation could cause real damage. Eric checked his expensive watch. Well, this has been enlightening, but unlike some people, I have important meetings to attend. Real contracts to fulfill. He stood up and straightened his tie. It was nice catching up, Liv. Good luck with your hobby. Just as Eric was about to walk away, a calm but firm voice spoke from nearby. Excuse me, but I believe you're sitting in my seat. Olivia looked up to see a tall man in his 40s standing beside their table. He wore a simple but clearly expensive dark gray suit with neat salt and pepper hair. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. Eric looked, annoyed at the interruption. We're having a private conversation here, the man smiled slightly. Actually, I have a lunch appointment with Ms. Mason to discuss some rather important business, and you're keeping us from it. Olivia stared at the stranger, confused. She had no lunch appointment today. She had been waiting for a potential client who never showed up, giving Eric the perfect chance to ambush her. The man turned to her, extending his hand. Daniel Carter, CEO of Frontier Aerospace. Sorry I'm late. Traffic from the spaceport was terrible. Olivia nearly dropped her water glass. Daniel Carter was a famous name in the aerospace industry. Frontier Aerospace had changed private space travel and was now leading the way in the colonization of Mars. And he was here, saying he was her lunch appointment? Eric's face turned slightly pale, but he recovered quickly. Daniel Carter, I'm Eric Daniels from Nexus Systems. We've been trying to get a meeting with your team for months. He stood, offering his hand. Daniel ignored Eric's outstretched hand and instead pulled out his chair, sitting beside Olivia. Ms. Mason and I have important matters to discuss regarding the navigation systems for our new space platform. I'm afraid this is a private meeting. Eric stood frozen for a moment, then gathered himself. Of course. Olivia, we should catch up. Another time. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table. And Mr. Carter, I'll have my assistant reach out to schedule something. Daniel didn't look up from the menu he had opened. That won't be necessary. After Eric reluctantly left, Olivia turned to Daniel. I don't understand, we don't have a meeting scheduled. Daniel closed his menu and looked at her directly. No, we don't. But no one deserves to be spoken to like that, especially not someone with your talents. You know my work? Olivia asked, surprised. Your paper on fluid dynamics in space and its applications for life support systems? Brilliant. And your proposal for the shielding against cosmic radiation was years ahead of its time. He smiled. The aerospace community is smaller than people. Think. The good ideas and the good engineers get noticed. Olivia was speechless. One of the most important figures in private space exploration had not only read her work, but remembered it. Now, Daniel continued, while I did interrupt under false pretenses, I would like to discuss a real opportunity with you if you're interested. But first, let's order. The salmon here is excellent. They ordered their food, and as they waited, Daniel explained more about Frontier Aerospace and their current projects. We're at a critical point in our Mars program, he said. The technology for getting there is solid, but creating sustainable living environments remains our biggest challenge. Life support systems are my specialty, Olivia said, feeling more confident now. Particularly closed-loop environmental controls that can function with minimal external resources. Daniel nodded. That's exactly what caught my attention in your research. Traditional mechanical systems require too many replacement parts and too much maintenance for long-duration Mars missions. Their food arrived, and as they ate, Daniel asked Olivia about her small engineering firm, how she started it, her current projects, and her long-term goals. It hasn't been easy, she admitted. Breaking into the aerospace industry as a small player is tough. Most of the big contracts go to established companies with decades of history. Innovation rarely comes from established players, Daniel replied. They have too much invested in existing technologies. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to see solutions that others miss. Olivia thought about the many nights she had worked late in her small lab, testing new designs that the larger companies considered too risky or unconventional. She had always believed in her ideas even when others, like Eric, had dismissed them. "Tell me about your adaptive filtration system," Daniel said. "The one that uses modified algae cultures for air purification." Olivia was surprised again. That project wasn't even published yet, it was still in early development. "How did you know about that?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "As I said, good ideas get noticed. One of your former classmates works for me now. She mentioned your research was heading in an interesting direction." Olivia felt a mix of pride and caution. The system is still experimental, but initial tests are promising. The algae can process carbon dioxide much more efficiently than mechanical scrubbers, and they adapt to changing conditions in ways that machines can't. "And they reproduce themselves," Daniel added. "No replacement parts needed." "Exactly. For long-term missions, biological systems have significant advantages over mechanical ones." Daniel set down his fork and looked at Olivia seriously. "I'm going to be direct, Ms. Mason. Frontier Aerospace is looking for new approaches to our Mars habitat life support systems. The current designs are too dependent on regular supply missions from Earth. If we're going to establish a true colony, we need systems that can sustain themselves for years, not months." Olivia felt her heart rate increase. "Are you suggesting—" "I want your firm to develop the environmental control systems for our next generation of Mars habitats," Daniel said, "with full funding and access to our testing facilities." Olivia nearly choked on her water. This kind of contract could transform her small firm overnight. It was the opportunity she had been working toward for years. "Why me?" she asked, still not quite believing what she was hearing. "You have hundreds of engineers and partnerships with major contractors." Daniel considered his answer carefully. Large organizations can become stuck in their ways. They follow established patterns because that's what's safe. But Mars isn't safe, and conventional thinking won't get us there. He leaned forward slightly. "Your approach is different. You're willing to combine biological and mechanical systems in ways the larger firms won't consider. That kind of thinking is exactly what we need." Olivia thought about the implications. A contract with Frontier would mean expanding her team, upgrading her lab, and potentially relocating closer to their facilities. "This would be a major undertaking for a firm my size," she said honestly. "We would provide the resources you need," Daniel assured her. "And you would maintain control of your intellectual property, with licensing agreements for the specific applications in our habitats." This was another surprise. Most large companies demanded complete ownership of any technology developed under their contracts. "That's unusually generous," Olivia said. Daniel shrugged. "I'm more interested in getting to Mars than in owning every patent. Innovation happens faster when people are properly credited and compensated for their ideas." As they finished their meal, Daniel pulled a small tablet from his jacket and handed it to Olivia. "Here's an overview of what we're looking for. Take a few days to review it and think about whether you're interested." Olivia glanced at the screen, seeing technical specifications, timeline expectations, and a budget figure that made her eyes widen. "This is a serious offer," she said, looking up at Daniel. "I don't make offers that aren't serious, Ms. Mason." He stood and extended his hand. "I hope you'll consider it carefully. We could do remarkable things together." Olivia shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Carter, for both the opportunity and for earlier." Daniel smiled. "Some people build themselves up by tearing others down. I prefer to build others up and see what we can achieve together." As they walked toward the exit, Olivia noticed Eric sitting at the bar, watching them with a confused expression. Daniel noticed too and nodded slightly in Eric's direction. Outside the restaurant, a sleek car waited at the curb. The driver opened the door for Daniel. "I'll have my assistant contact you next week for your decision," Daniel said. "But regardless of what you decide about the contract, don't let people like your ex define your worth or your potential." As Daniel's car pulled away, Olivia stood on the sidewalk feeling as though her entire future had just shifted course in the span of a lunch hour, from public humiliation to the opportunity of a lifetime, all because someone important had seen value in her work that others had missed. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood in the main lobby of Frontier Aerospace headquarters. The building was impressive, a modern structure of glass and steel with a large model of Mars hanging from the ceiling. Visitors and employees moved quickly through the space, everyone seeming to have important places to be. Olivia had spent the past 2 weeks reviewing Daniel's proposal, discussing it with her small team, and finally making the decision to accept. Today was her first official meeting as a Frontier contractor. "Ms. Mason?" A young woman approached her. "I'm Laura, Mr. Carter's assistant. He's ready to see you now." Laura led Olivia through security and into an elevator that moved quickly to the top floor. When the doors opened, they stepped into a large open office area with views of the desert landscape and Frontier's private launch facility in the distance. Daniel Carter was waiting for her in a conference room. He stood as she entered, extending his hand with a smile. "Ms. Mason, welcome to Frontier. I'm glad you accepted our offer." "Thank you for the opportunity," Olivia replied, feeling both nervous and excited. "I'm looking forward to getting started." "Good." Daniel gestured to the table where several tablets were laid out. "I've assembled a team to work with you on the Habitat environmental controls. But before we bring them in, I wanted to go over some details with you first." They sat down and Daniel activated a large screen on the wall. A detailed model of a cylindrical structure appeared. Frontier's Mars Habitat design. "This is our current Habitat model," he explained. "It's designed to house 12 people comfortably for up to 3 years without resupply from Earth. Your environmental control system will be the heart of this structure." Olivia studied the model carefully. "What about power requirements?" "My bioadaptive systems need consistent light and temperature control. The Habitat will have both solar arrays and a small nuclear generator," Daniel said. "Even during dust storms, we'll maintain stable power." They spent the next hour discussing technical details. Olivia was impressed by Daniel's knowledge. Unlike many executives, he understood the engineering challenges completely. "There's something else you should know," Daniel said after they had covered the basic requirements. "Your former colleague is now working with one of our competitors." "Eric?" Olivia asked, surprised. Daniel nodded. "Nexus Systems recently signed a contract with Mars Initiative, our main competitor in the private Mars race. They're developing a rival habitat design." Olivia felt a twinge of anxiety. Eric would now be working directly against her in the same field. "Does that concern you?" Daniel asked, watching her reaction. Olivia thought for a moment. "It doesn't change the science. My systems will work regardless of who else is developing competing technologies." Daniel smiled. "That's what I wanted to hear. Now let me introduce you to your team." He pressed a button, and the conference room door opened. 5 people entered, 3 men and 2 women, all carrying tablets and looking curious. "Everyone, this is Olivia Mason, the engineer I told you about. She'll be leading the environmental control systems development for the Mars habitats." The team members introduced themselves. There was Ben, the life support specialist; Sophia, the materials scientist; Grant, the software engineer; Maria, the botanist; and Paul, the mechanical systems expert. "We've reviewed your bioadaptive filtration concept," Sophia said. "It's brilliant, combining mechanical and biological processes in a single integrated system. The algae cultivation approach could revolutionize long-term life support," added Maria. "I have some ideas for enhancing the oxygen production rates in low-light conditions." Olivia felt a warm sense of validation. These people, experts in their fields, saw the value in her work without question or condescension. Daniel let them discuss technical details for a few minutes, then brought the meeting back to order. Now for the timeline. We need a working prototype in 6 months and a flight-ready system in 18 months. That's aggressive, Paul noted. Standard development cycles for life support systems are typically 36 months. Mars won't wait, Daniel replied simply. The launch window is in 2 years. We need to be ready. The team looked at each other, considering the challenge. Olivia spoke up first. It's doable, but we'll need dedicated lab space and priority access to testing facilities. You'll have them, Daniel assured her. I've already cleared out the east wing of Research Building 3 for your team. It has all the equipment you requested, plus some additional tools I thought might be useful. After the meeting ended, the team headed to their new lab to get set up. Daniel asked Olivia to stay behind for a moment. There's one more thing, he said when they were alone. I'm putting you in charge of this team not just because of your technical skills, but because I believe you have the vision to see this through. Olivia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Daniel walked to the window, looking out at the launch facility. Do you know why I started Frontier Aerospace, Ms. Mason? To advance private space exploration, Olivia guessed. That's the public reason, Daniel said. The personal one is that 20 years ago, I was in a situation not unlike yours. I had ideas that the established players dismissed as too radical or risky. I was told repeatedly that I didn't understand how the industry worked. He turned to face her, so I decided to change how the industry worked. Olivia understood now why Daniel had intervened that day at the restaurant. He had seen himself in her situation. The Mars Habitat contract is just the beginning, Daniel continued. If your systems perform as well as I believe they will, Frontier will back you in developing applications beyond Mars, asteroid mining operations, lunar bases, deep space missions. Why are you telling me this now? Olivia asked. Because I want you to think bigger than just this contract. The work you're doing could change how humans live in space permanently. Don't constrain your vision to what others think is possible. As Olivia left the conference room to join her new team, she felt a surge of determination. This was more than just a job or a contract. It was a chance to prove that her approaches were valid, that her vision for human survival in space had real value. In the lab, she found her team already setting up equipment and discussing ideas. They looked up as she entered, waiting for her direction. Let's get started, she said with confidence. We have a lot of work to do. Over the following weeks, Olivia and her team worked long hours developing and testing components for the new environmental system. The bioadaptive filtration unit began to take shape, a complex integration of algae chambers, mechanical filters, and smart sensors that could adjust to changing conditions automatically. Progress was steady, and Daniel visited the lab regularly to check on their work. He seemed pleased with what he saw, offering suggestions but never micromanaging. One evening, as Olivia was working late, she received an unexpected message on her tablet. It was from Eric. Heard you're working with Frontier now. Impressive. But Mars Initiative just doubled their habitat development budget. May the best system win. Olivia didn't respond. She set aside the tablet and returned to her work, more determined than ever to succeed. This wasn't about beating Eric anymore. It was about creating something that would help humanity take its next great leap. 4 months into the project, Olivia's team had made remarkable progress. The prototype environmental control system was taking shape in their lab, a series of connected chambers where specially grown algae converted carbon dioxide into oxygen, while smart filters removed toxins and balanced humidity. The latest tests show 40% better efficiency than traditional systems, Sophia reported during their morning meeting. And the algae are adapting to the simulated Mars light conditions, even better than we expected. Great work, Olivia said, looking around at her team with pride. What had once been just her idea was now becoming reality thanks to their combined efforts. Let's run the dust storm simulation today. We need to make sure the system can handle reduced light for extended periods. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Olivia's tablet chimed with a message from Daniel. Board meeting tomorrow. Need you to present current progress. 9 a.m. main conference room. Olivia spent that evening preparing her presentation, carefully explaining the technical innovations in terms the board members would understand. This was an important opportunity to secure continued support for her project. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the conference room early to set up. She was surprised to see Eric Daniels already there talking with several board members. "Eric, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice professional despite her shock. Before Eric could answer, Daniel Carter entered the room. "Ms. Mason, I see you've noticed our visitor. Mr. Daniels is here at the request of board member Phillips, who wanted an outside assessment of our habitat development program." Board member Phillips, an older man with a stern expression, nodded. "Nothing personal, Ms. Mason. Standard due diligence for a project of this size." Olivia glanced at Eric, who gave her a small, smug smile. She understood immediately. Eric had somehow convinced Phillips to bring him in, probably as a way to gather information about her work or to undermine her. "Of course," she said calmly. "I'm happy to present our progress to everyone." As the room filled with board members and executives, Olivia connected her tablet to the display system. She would not let Eric's presence rattle her. "Good morning," she began once everyone was seated. "I'm pleased to report that our environmental control system for the Mars habitat has reached several key milestones ahead of schedule." She displayed images of the prototype, explaining how the bioadaptive system worked and showing test results that demonstrated its advantages over conventional systems. The board members looked impressed, asking thoughtful questions about power requirements and backup systems. Then Eric raised his hand. "I have a question about system stability. How does your algae-based filtration handle sudden pressure changes or toxic gas releases? These are common emergency scenarios in space habitats." It was a good technical question designed to highlight potential weaknesses. But Olivia was prepared. "Great question," she replied. "We've implemented 3 layers of safeguards. First, the algae chambers are divided into isolated sections, so contamination in one area can't spread. Second, the mechanical backup systems activate automatically if biological functions decline. And third, we've developed a rapid response neutralization process that can clear toxins within 90 seconds. She displayed the safety test results, which showed the system performing perfectly under various emergency conditions. Eric nodded, but didn't look convinced. Impressive on paper, but biological systems are inherently unpredictable. What happens if the algae mutate over time, or if Mars radiation affects their function? We've actually considered that. Maria, the botanist on Olivia's team, spoke up. The algae strains are genetically stabilized to prevent significant mutation, and we've subjected them to radiation levels 200% higher than worst-case Mars scenarios. They remained functional with only minor adaptations, which were actually beneficial for oxygen production. Eric looked slightly taken aback that Olivia's team had already addressed these concerns, but he pressed on. "What about maintenance? Traditional mechanical systems have well-established repair protocols. Your hybrid approach seems much more complex to maintain." "Actually, the opposite is true," Olivia explained. "Mechanical systems require replacement parts shipped from Earth. Our biological components self-regenerate from small samples. We estimate a 70% reduction in maintenance requirements over a 3-year mission." As the presentation continued, Eric kept asking increasingly technical questions, clearly trying to find flaws. But for each challenge, Olivia, or a member of her team, had a solid answer backed by test data. By the end of the presentation, most of the board members were nodding appreciatively. Board member Phillips, who had invited Eric, looked thoughtful. "Thank you, Ms. Mason," Daniel said when she finished. "Now, Mr. Daniels, I believe you wanted to share some thoughts on our overall habitat design?" Eric stood and connected his own tablet to the display. "Thank you. As requested, I've reviewed Frontier's habitat approach and compared it to current industry standards." He began by highlighting how most aerospace companies were using fully mechanical environmental systems, with triple redundancy, the traditional approach. Then he showed the Mars Initiative design, which his company Nexus Systems was helping to develop. As you can see, our approach focuses on proven technologies with decades of space testing, Eric explained. While innovative ideas like Ms. Mason's are interesting academic exercises, when human lives are at stake, reliability must take precedence over theoretical efficiency gains. Olivia noticed Eric carefully avoided directly criticizing her system, instead repeatedly emphasizing words like proven, tested, and reliable for his own design. Then Eric reached the conclusion of his presentation. Based on my analysis, I believe Frontier should consider a more conservative approach. The bioadaptive system represents an unnecessary risk to the overall mission success. The room was quiet for a moment. Then board member Phillips spoke. Mr. Daniels, your points about proven technology are well taken. However, I'm curious. If Ms. Mason's system performs as her data suggests, wouldn't it provide significant advantages for long-term Mars habitation? Eric looked uncomfortable. If it performs as claimed, yes. But that's a significant if for an unproven system. Daniel Carter had been watching silently. Now he stood. Board members, we have a choice to make. We can do what's been done before, or we can push boundaries. Mars presents challenges unlike any we've faced. Perhaps those challenges require new solutions. He walked to the front of the room. Mr. Daniels has presented the conventional wisdom well, but Frontier Aerospace wasn't built on convention. Ms. Mason's team has met every technical benchmark we've set. I propose we continue with the bioadaptive system development as planned. The board voted immediately, with all but 2 members supporting Daniels' proposal. As the meeting ended, Olivia felt a wave of relief and validation. Her system would move forward. Eric approached her as people were leaving the room. Impressive performance, Olivia. You've got them convinced for now. But the real test will come when actual lives depend on your fancy algae garden. Thanks for your concern, Olivia replied calmly. But I stand by our work. Eric leaned closer, lowering his voice. Just so you know, Mars Initiative is 6 weeks ahead of schedule. We'll have our habitat ready before you. That's how you win the space race, with speed and reliability, not untested experiments. Before Olivia could respond, Daniel joined them. Mr. Daniels, your car is waiting. Thank you for your input today. After Eric left, Daniel turned to Olivia. Don't let him get to you. He has his own agenda. I know, Olivia said. But is it true that Mars Initiative is ahead of schedule? Daniel smiled slightly. They may be moving quickly, but they're building yesterday's technology. We're building tomorrow's. That's worth taking the time to get right. As Olivia returned to her lab, she couldn't help but wonder if Eric had gained useful information from today's presentation, information that could help Mars Initiative compete against Frontier. But she pushed the thought aside. Her team was counting on her to lead, not to worry about corporate espionage. How did it go? Sophia asked when Olivia entered the lab. We got approval to continue, Olivia said with a smile. Now let's get back to work. We have a planet to colonize. 8 months later, Olivia stood in Frontier's main testing facility, watching as technicians made final adjustments to the full-scale habitat module. Her environmental control system had been installed and would undergo its final testing today, a simulated 1-month Mars mission with 6 crew members living inside the habitat. Nervous, Daniel asked, coming to stand beside her. A little, Olivia admitted. But we've tested every component thoroughly. The system is ready. The past months had been intense. Her team had worked long hours, solving problems and improving the design. There had been setbacks, an algae culture contamination, a sensor array failure, but they had overcome each challenge. The final system was even better than her original design. The board members are arriving now, Daniel said, along with some special guests. Olivia turned to see several people entering the observation area. Among them was Eric, accompanied by 2 men in Mars Initiative uniforms. What is he doing here? Olivia asked quietly. Board member Phillips insisted we invite representatives from Mars Initiative, Daniel explained. Some kind of professional courtesy. Don't worry about it. Today is about your team's achievement. The testing facility was impressive. A massive hangar containing the cylindrical habitat module, surrounded by control stations and monitoring equipment. Dozens of technicians and engineers moved about, making preparations for the test. Daniel led Olivia to the front of the observation area where the board members and guests were gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "today we begin the final testing phase of Frontiers Mars Habitat Life Support Systems. I'd like to introduce the engineer who made this possible, Olivia Mason." There was polite applause. Olivia nodded in acknowledgement, aware of Eric watching her with an unreadable expression. Ms. Mason, one of the Mars Initiative representatives, said, "I understand your system uses biological components rather than standard mechanical filtration. Isn't that rather risky for a life support system?" Before Olivia could answer, Eric spoke up. "What my colleague means is that while innovation is admirable, Mars won't be forgiving of experimental approaches." Daniel stepped in smoothly. "Perhaps we should let the test results speak for themselves. Ms. Mason, would you like to explain what we'll be seeing today?" Olivia nodded and addressed the group. Today's test simulates a 1-month Mars mission with 6 crew members living in the habitat. The environmental system will face various challenges, including simulated dust storms, power fluctuations, and equipment failures. All conditions are set to Mars parameters: atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and radiation levels. She showed them the monitoring screens where they could watch the system's performance in real time. The bioadaptive approach means the system actually improves over time, learning from changing conditions and adjusting its processes accordingly. "Improving over time sounds good in theory," Eric commented, "but it also means unpredictability. Our mechanical systems provide consistent, reliable performance from day one." One of the board members looked concerned. "Is that true, Ms. Mason? Is your system unpredictable?" "Not at all," Olivia replied confidently. "The biological components operate within well-defined parameters. The system's ability to adapt simply means it becomes more efficient as it runs. Think of it as continuous self-optimization rather than unpredictability." The test began with the 6 test crew members entering the habitat. They would live inside for the next 30 days, completely dependent on Olivia's environmental system for air, water purification, and waste processing. For the first week, everything ran perfectly. The monitoring screen showed all systems operating within optimal ranges, and the crew reported excellent air quality and comfort levels. Olivia and her team took shifts monitoring the data, ready to address any issues. Then on day 8, an alarm sounded. One of the technicians called Olivia over to his station. "We have a problem," he said. "The main power system just failed as planned for the test, but the backup isn't engaging properly. The environmental system is running on emergency power only. This was one of the planned challenges, but something wasn't working correctly." Olivia checked the readings, her mind racing. The habitat was losing power faster than expected. "The crew has about 4 hours of emergency life support," the technician said. "Should we abort the test?" Olivia studied the data carefully. "No. Let me see what's happening first." She noticed something strange. The power drain was much higher than it should be, even with all systems running. It was as if something was deliberately drawing extra power. "Can you show me the complete power distribution map?" she asked. When the technician displayed it, Olivia immediately spotted the problem. "There, section C4. It's pulling 3 times the normal power load." She grabbed a tablet and opened the system schematics. Section C4 contained backup mechanical filtration systems that should only activate if the biological systems failed, which they hadn't. "Someone modified the activation protocols," she said, suddenly understanding. "The mechanical backups are running alongside the primary systems, creating a massive power drain." "Can you fix it?" Daniel asked, having joined them at the monitoring station. "Yes, but I need to access the main control panel inside the habitat." Minutes later, Olivia was dressed in a jumpsuit and passing through the habitat airlock. Inside, the test crew looked concerned but calm as they operated on emergency lighting. Olivia went directly to the main control panel and opened it. Just as she suspected, The activation protocols had been altered. Someone had changed the programming to force both systems to run simultaneously, guaranteeing a power failure. Working quickly, she restored the original settings and restarted the system. Lights came back on throughout the habitat as power levels returned to normal. Back in the observation area, Daniel was waiting with the board members. Eric and the Mars Initiative representatives were nowhere to be seen. "The system is back online and functioning perfectly," Olivia reported. "Someone deliberately sabotaged the power management protocols." "We know," Daniel said grimly. "Security cameras caught one of the Mars Initiative technicians accessing the control systems yesterday. He claimed Eric asked him to check something in the programming. So Eric tried to make my system fail," Olivia said, feeling a mix of anger and vindication, "and instead demonstrated how quickly and effectively it could be fixed," Daniel added. "The board is impressed with both the system's resilience and your quick thinking." 3 weeks later, the test concluded successfully. Olivia's bioadaptive environmental system had performed beyond expectations, maintaining perfect living conditions despite the sabotage attempt and all the planned challenges. At the final presentation to the board, Daniel made a special announcement. Based on the outstanding test results, Frontier Aerospace is not only implementing Ms. Mason's environmental system in our Mars habitats, but we're also establishing a new division focused on advanced life support technologies, with Ms. Mason as its director. The board members applauded as Daniel continued. "And I'm pleased to report that Mars Initiative has indefinitely delayed their habitat program due to, quote, technical and personnel challenges. It seems Mr. Daniels is no longer with their organization." Later, as Olivia and Daniel looked out at the habitat prototype that would soon be manufactured for actual use on Mars, she asked, "Did you know Eric would try something like that?" Daniel smiled slightly. "I suspected he might. People like that are predictable. They believe everyone else cheats because they do." "What happens now?" Olivia asked. "Now," Daniel said, "we go to Mars, and your technology helps humans live there." He handed her a tablet. "These are the preliminary plans for the first permanent Mars settlement. Your environmental systems will be the heart of it." Olivia looked at the plans, feeling a sense of accomplishment that far outweighed any lingering thoughts of Eric and his failed sabotage. From being publicly embarrassed at lunch to designing the systems that would help humans live on another planet, it had been quite a journey. "Thank you," she said to Daniel, "for interrupting my lunch that day." "No," Daniel replied. "Thank you for having the ideas worth fighting for." As they walked toward the exit, Olivia knew that somewhere in the future, humans would breathe air on Mars thanks to her work. That was the final word that mattered.